I am Harrison, 32 years old. After 5 years of absolute, suffocating silence, my parents decided to call me out of nowhere to demand I fund their retirement because they gave my entire inheritance to my brother, and he blew every single penny of it. While I was quite literally living out of my freezing Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot, fighting just to find my next meal, my parents looked me dead in the eye and said, "You are a massive disappointment, Harrison. Your brother is the true businessman of this family." They laughed at me in front of 20 people at our annual family Thanksgiving dinner, treating me like a stray dog begging for scraps in my own childhood home. But there is one major thing they did not know. I was not just some forgotten failure building a tiny startup in the shadows. I was the anonymous buyer who had just aggressively purchased the debt on their foreclosed real estate. And right now, they are sitting in my penthouse office, completely unaware that they are about to find out they have absolutely nothing left. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled their perfect little world piece by piece, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let us go back to where this nightmare finally caught up to them. The phone on my massive mahogany desk buzzed, vibrating against the polished wood. I usually screen my calls, letting my assistant filter out the endless noise of eager investors, desperate vendors, and people looking for a quick handout. But the caller ID made my blood run instantly cold. It simply read, "Beatrice, my mother." I sat there and stared at the glowing screen as if it were a venomous snake uncoiling on my desk, preparing to strike. 5 long years. 5 Thanksgiving dinners, 5 Christmases, 5 birthdays. Not a single text message, not a single voicemail, not even a card in the mail. Nothing. Just 5 years of absolute, deafening silence after they kicked me to the curb and essentially told me I was dead to them. I reached out, my hand actually shaking for a fraction of a second, my fingers hovering over the glowing red decline button. But a dark, undeniable curiosity took over my mind. I swiped green and brought the expensive phone to my ear. "Harrison, sweetheart." Her voice echoed through the speaker. It was that same sugary, deeply manipulative tone she always used right before she asked for a massive favor. It was the exact tone she used when she wanted me to do my brother Rowan's homework in high school so he could go out and party. It was the tone she used when she coldly told me I did not need my college fund because Rowan was going to an Ivy League school and he needed the money much more than I did. "I am very busy," I said, my voice flatter and harder than concrete. "Make it quick." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. She was definitely not used to me speaking to her like that. She was used to the old Harrison, the eager-to-please, desperate golden retriever of a son who just wanted his mother's basic love and approval. "Cannot a mother just call to check on her incredibly successful son?" she asked, a fake little laugh fluttering through the line, sounding like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "We saw the big article about your tech company in Forbes, honey. We are just so incredibly proud of you. Your father and I were talking over breakfast, and we realized it has been far too long. We miss our family. We miss you." "You do not have a family," I replied, refusing to give her an inch. "You have Rowan. You made that perfectly clear a long time ago." I heard my father, Winston, whispering nervously in the background. My mother cleared her throat, the fake sweetness dropping just a fraction to reveal the sheer, unadulterated desperation underneath. "Harrison, please listen to me. We really need to talk. Things have gotten very difficult around here. Rowan has run into some really bad luck with his business investments. The market has been terrible, and people have taken advantage of his trusting nature. We have dipped into our retirement accounts to help him stay afloat, and well, the bank is being completely unreasonable about the mortgage on the family estate. We are facing a massive lawsuit from the lenders. We need your help, Harrison. We need a loan to clear this up." I actually laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was a dark, harsh bark that echoed in my spacious office, bouncing off the original artwork and the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was seriously asking for a loan. She had handed my older brother a multi-million-dollar inheritance on a silver platter, stood by and watched him burn it to the ground, and now she was calling the son she threw away like garbage to bail them all out. You want a loan? I said, leaning back in my leather executive chair, looking out at the sprawling city skyline below, a city I had conquered on my own terms. After you handed Rowan the keys to the entire kingdom, what happened to his brilliant real estate ventures? What happened to the golden child who was going to multiply the family wealth? He made mistakes, she snapped, her true colors flashing hot for a second before she reined it back in. He is your brother. We are your parents. You have more money than you know what to do with now, according to the news. We just need enough to pay off the bank, settle the lawsuit, and get back on our feet. You owe us that much for raising you and putting a roof over your head all those years. I owe you absolutely nothing, I said coldly, feeling the ice settle deep in my chest. But if you want to talk about the future, you can come to my office tomorrow at exactly 2 in the afternoon. Do not be late. I hung up the phone before she could say another single word. The next day, exactly at 2 o'clock, the heavy glass doors of my penthouse office swung open. My assistant, looking highly professional, led them in. Beatrice and Winston. They looked significantly older, worn down, the heavy bags under their eyes telling a pathetic story of sleepless nights and unpaid bills. My mother was clutching a designer handbag that looked like it had seen much better days, a desperate attempt to hold onto a wealthy status she clearly no longer possessed. My father looked down at the expensive carpet, unable to even meet my eyes. He looked small. Harrison, my mother breathed, looking around the lavish office, her eyes widening as she took in the sweeping views and the sheer scale of my success. This place is incredible. We always knew you would do well for yourself. Sit, I commanded, gesturing to the 2 modern chairs across from my massive desk. They sat down hesitantly, exchanging nervous glances. I did not offer them water. I did not offer them coffee or small talk. I simply reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a standard manila folder. I opened it and slid a glossy, cheap-looking brochure across the polished wood toward them. My mother picked it up, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. What is this? That is Shady Pines, I said, my voice completely devoid of any human emotion. It is a state-run assisted living facility on the deep industrial side of town. It is where you will be living by the end of this month. I have already filled out the preliminary admission forms. All you have to do is sign at the bottom of the last page. My mother dropped the brochure as if it had physically burned her fingers. Her face flushed a deep, ugly, blotchy red. Are you out of your mind? We are not going to some disgusting nursing home. We are staying in our house. We just need a check from you to clear the bank debt and make this lawsuit go away. You have no house? I said smoothly, interlocking my fingers and resting them on the desk. And you are definitely not getting a check from me. What kind of monster have you become? My father finally spoke up, his voice trembling with a pathetic mix of fear and anger. We gave you life. You are our flesh and blood. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk, looking them dead in the eye, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable. You want to know exactly how I became this monster? I asked softly, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Let us take a little trip down memory lane. Let us talk about the day you decided I was worth absolutely nothing. Because I thought the worst was over when you walked out of my life 5 years ago. I was so incredibly wrong. 5 years ago, the air in Lawyer Abernathy's office was thick, dusty, and suffocating. It smelled of old parchment paper, cheap lemon polish, and the distinct, putrid stench of familial betrayal. We were all gathered there to read the final documents regarding my grandfather's estate. I sat in a stiff, uncomfortable wooden chair, wearing my only decent suit, still painfully naive enough to believe that family meant fairness and loyalty. My parents sat together on a plush leather sofa, looking incredibly smug, and right between them sat Rowan, grinning like a cat that had just swallowed a very fat canary. Abernathy cleared his throat loudly, adjusting his reading glasses as he shuffled the thick stack of legal papers. According to the final amendments made by Winston and Beatrice, the entirety of the liquid assets, the family business, and the primary real estate holdings will be transferred solely to Rowan. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest, knocking the wind completely out of my lungs. I stopped breathing. I looked at Abernathy, absolutely sure I had misheard him. The room started to spin slightly. Wait, what? All of it? What about the 50-50 split we discussed? Yes, Harrison, Abernathy said softly, looking over his glasses at me with a flash of genuine pity that made me feel entirely sick to my stomach. Your parents have executed their legal right to bypass a split inheritance. They are gifting the estate entirely to your brother. Effective immediately. I turned slowly to my mother. She would not even look at me. She was busy smoothing out an imaginary wrinkle on her expensive designer skirt, her jaw set in a hard line. My father was suddenly very interested in staring at a boring oil painting on the far wall. Mom? Dad? I choked out, the burning sting of betrayal rising in the back of my throat. I have been working 80-hour weeks in the family business for 6 years. I built the entire new digital inventory system from scratch. I managed the warehouse logistics. Rowan has not stepped foot in the office in 3 years. He does not even know how to run the payroll software. Why are you doing this? My mother finally turned her head and looked at me, her eyes as cold and unforgiving as river stones. Harrison, you need to try to understand the bigger picture. You are good at the technical things, the small, tedious things. But Rowan has vision. He has a true entrepreneurial spirit. He is the man of the family now. We need someone who can take your grandfather's legacy and multiply it, take it to the next level. You just do not have what it takes to lead a real company. He failed out of his MBA program. I yelled, abandoning all professionalism, my voice cracking with desperation. He owes money to half the city. He crashed his car drunk last year and you paid off the cops. Do not raise your voice to your mother in public, my father barked, suddenly finding his fake courage. It is our money and it is our decision. Rowan is taking over the company. Furthermore, we are downsizing our properties. We need you to vacate the guest house by the end of this week. Rowan needs the space to build his new home office. They were kicking me out, not just from the family business I had poured my 20s into, but from my actual home. I looked over at Rowan. He leaned back into the leather sofa and gave me a small, incredibly smug wink. You are making a massive mistake, I whispered, my voice shaking with a deep, dark rage I did not know I possessed. The only mistake we ever made was spending so much money on your college fund when you clearly lack the ambition to do anything great. My mother shot back, her words designed to cut as deeply as possible. I walked out of that lawyer's office with exactly $400 in my checking account and a single cardboard box of my personal belongings. That winter was the coldest on record in our city. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, I lived in my old, beat-up Honda Civic. I parked in the darkest corner of a Walmart parking lot, wrapping myself in 3 cheap sleeping bags every single night just to stop my teeth from chattering so hard they ached. I brushed my teeth in public restrooms using cold tap water. I ate 90-cent instant ramen noodles dry because I could not afford a hot plate to boil water. Every single night, I stared at the thick frost building up on my windshield, and the memory of my mother's cold eyes and Rowan's smug wink fueled a raging fire in my gut. I did not want to just survive. I wanted to win. I wanted to build an empire so massive it would cast a permanent, suffocating shadow over their pathetic lives. That is exactly when I met Clara. I was working the graveyard shift at a cheap 24-hour diner, wiping down sticky tables and utilizing their free Wi-Fi to relentlessly code a data management software I had been dreaming up for months. Clara was a regular customer, a brilliant, tough-as-nails marketing executive who had just gone through a brutal divorce. Her husband had tried to take everything, including full custody of her kids, and she was looking for a fresh start. She sat in my section, drinking black coffee, and one night she saw my laptop screen. She saw my raw code. More importantly, she saw the sheer, starving hunger in my eyes. She bought me a plate of real food and said, "You have the product. I have the pitch. Let us make these corporate vultures bleed." Clara introduced me to Sylvia, a razor-sharp business partner who handled complex logistics and legal contracts like a seasoned military general. Together, the three of us built the tech company from the absolute ground up. I did not sleep for 3 solid years. I missed holidays, I missed birthdays, I missed the concept of weekends. I poured my sweat, my tears, and my absolute, unadulterated rage into every single line of code. We landed our first major corporate contract, then our second, then a government logistics deal. Before I knew it, I was not just making a decent salary. I was building a tech juggernaut that was dominating the industry market share. I kept my personal life entirely private. I changed my phone number immediately. I blocked my family on every single social media platform. I wanted to be a complete ghost to them. But ghosts have a very funny way of being dragged back to the surface when money is involved. It started innocently enough with random text messages from unknown numbers popping up on my secure business phone. "Hey bro, heard you are doing really well. Call me, let's grab a beer. Harrison, it is Mom. We need to talk about some lucrative business opportunities for the family." I ignored them completely, but they kept coming week after week. And they were far too specific. They knew about my recent company valuation numbers. They knew about the new commercial real estate I had purchased for our headquarters. They knew details about my salary and stock options that only my absolute inner circle should know. I hired an expensive private investigator to find the leak. I thought it was a corporate spy. I thought it was a rival tech company trying to force a lawsuit or steal intellectual property. The truth was far more disgusting and personal. The investigator requested a meeting and handed me a thick file filled with photographs, printed emails, and highlighted bank statements. The mole was Felix. Felix, my oldest supposed friend from college. The guy who had bought me a burger when I was literally starving in my car. The guy I had trusted enough to give a highly paid, minor consulting role in my new company when I started making real money. Felix had been selling detailed information about my net worth, my properties, and my business moves to my mother for the past 6 solid months. She had been paying him regular cash installments out of a secret checking account. She wanted to know exactly how much I was worth so she could figure out exactly how much she could extract from me when the time was right. I called Felix into my office the very next morning. I threw the stark photographs and the bank statements directly onto the center of my desk. He took one look, turned pale white, and started sweating profusely through his expensive dress shirt. "Harrison, man, you have to listen to me," Felix stammered, holding his hands up and backing away toward the heavy door. "Your mom, she was just worried about you. She reached out to me. She offered me a few $1,000 here and there for updates. I needed the cash for a new car. It is no big deal, right? You are absolutely loaded now. You make that money in a day. You sold my privacy and my trust to the woman who left me to freeze to death in a parking lot," I said, my voice dead calm, devoid of any anger, which terrified him even more. "You are fired. I am blacklisting you from every single tech firm in this city. I will make sure your reputation is destroyed. If I ever see your face near my building again, I will bury you in so much legal red tape and corporate lawsuits that your grandchildren will still be paying off the lawyer fees." Felix ran out of the office like a beaten dog, not even stopping to collect his belongings. I sat alone in the quiet of my office, the heavy, dark realization settling over my shoulders. My mother was not just a manipulative parent. She was a calculated predator, and she was circling my success, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike and take what she felt she was owed. I thought I had cut the rot out of my life, but the infection was far deeper than I ever imagined. The grand, opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was bathed in warm golden light, smelling of expensive floral arrangements and roasted duck. Flashbulbs blinded me constantly as I walked across the massive stage to accept the prestigious Entrepreneur of the Year award. Hundreds of industry titans, politicians, and wealthy investors clapped loudly, their expensive diamond jewelry sparkling under the massive crystal chandeliers. I smiled my best media-trained smile, shook hands firmly with the presenters, and delivered a perfectly rehearsed, inspirational speech about perseverance, innovation, and overcoming adversity. But behind the bright smile, my jaw was clenched tight enough to crack a molar. The text messages from my family had recently escalated from subtle inquiries to outright emotional blackmail and desperate threats. Your father is having severe chest pains from the extreme financial stress. My mother had texted just 3 hours before the ceremony started. Rowan might lose everything he worked for. How can you stand there wearing custom-tailored suits while your own flesh and blood suffers so horribly? As I stepped off the stage, holding the heavy, engraved glass trophy, Nathaniel was waiting quietly in the wings. Nathaniel was a self-made billionaire venture capitalist, a man who had mentored me, supported my company financially early on, and gradually become the only person I truly allowed into my deeply guarded personal life. He handed me a glass of expensive champagne, his dark, intelligent eyes studying my incredibly tense face. You look like a man walking down the aisle to a lethal injection, not a man who just completely conquered the tech world, Nathaniel said, his deep, resonant voice cutting through the loud, ambient noise of the ballroom. It is just some family drama, I muttered, taking a long, fast sip of the champagne to calm my nerves. Family is just a biological word, Harrison, he replied softly, leaning in closer. You choose who gets to stay in your life. You choose who gets to sit at your table. Remember that. Later that night, Nathaniel drove me home in his sleek, immaculate black Porsche. The incredibly powerful engine hummed a steady, comforting rhythm as we navigated the empty, neon-lit city streets. The premium leather seats were comfortable. The air smelled of his expensive, woodsy cologne, and for a brief, fleeting moment, sitting next to him, I felt a flicker of genuine, quiet peace. I felt safe. But that fragile peace was completely shattered the exact moment my secure phone buzzed again. It was not my mother this time. It was an urgent email from Victor. Victor was the CEO of a massive rival firm, a ruthless, arrogant, inherited wealth brat who had aggressively tried to buy out my company early on and failed miserably when Clara outmaneuvered his legal team. He hated me with a burning passion, and I thoroughly despised him. I opened the email. It was a direct forward of a public commercial real estate listing. Attached was a highly sarcastic message from Victor. Looks like your prestigious family legacy is hitting the public auction block, Harrison. The bank is officially foreclosing on their massive estate. I am seriously thinking about buying the property and paving it over to turn it into a parking lot for my junior employees. Just a friendly heads up from your favorite competitor. My stomach dropped completely out of my body. I stared at the glowing screen, reading the cruel words over and over again until they blurred. The foreclosure. My childhood home. The massive, sprawling estate where we hosted those giant Thanksgiving dinners. The house where my grandfather had built his legacy from the ground up was being forcefully repossessed by the bank. Rowan had not just made a few bad tech investments. He had completely and utterly destroyed the family's entire financial foundation. He had clearly leveraged the estate to the maximum limit, defaulted on the massive loans, and now the bank was coming for their blood. And Victor, that opportunistic, bottom-feeding vulture, had somehow found out through his banking connections and was planning to buy it just to publicly humiliate me in the press. "Stop the car," I said to Nathaniel, my voice tight. He pulled the Porsche over to the curb immediately, putting it in park and looking at me with intense, focused concern. "What is it? What happened?" I wordlessly handed him the phone, showing him the email. Nathaniel read it quickly, his strong jaw tightening. "This is a direct power play. Victor knows this will get under your skin. He wants you to react emotionally. He wants you to make a stupid, expensive mistake. He wants to buy my family's home just to spit in my face and brag about it at the country club," I said, my breathing becoming shallow and fast, panic mixing with pure rage. "So let him do it," Nathaniel said gently, putting a warm, steadying hand on my tense shoulder. "Let the house go. Let your family face the harsh legal consequences of their own actions. You owe them absolutely nothing. They made their bed with Rowan." "You do not understand the optics of this," I said, staring out the window at the dark, rain-slicked street. "If Victor buys that house, He holds it over me forever in the business world. And if my parents lose that house to a complete stranger, they will never, ever stop playing the professional victim. They will drag my name through the mud to every media outlet, claiming the wealthy tech CEO's son selfishly let his poor, aging parents become homeless. Then what exactly are you going to do? Nathaniel asked, watching me closely. A cold, terrifying, crystal-clear clarity suddenly washed over my entire body. I did not want to save my parents. I did not want to protect them from the consequences of their cruelty. I wanted to be the one holding the executioner's axe. I wanted them to know, without a single shadow of a doubt, that their fate rested entirely and solely in the hands of the son they threw away like garbage. I need to make a phone call, I said, pulling my phone back. At 2 a.m., I was pacing relentlessly back and forth in my penthouse living room. The phone pressed painfully hard against my ear. I was calling Lawyer Abernathy, the exact same lawyer who had coldly processed my disinheritance 5 years ago while looking over his glasses at me. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding groggy, confused, and slightly annoyed. Harrison? Do you have any idea what time it is? Abernathy mumbled into the receiver. I need you to execute a highly confidential transaction, Abernathy, right now? I said, completely skipping the pleasantries. I know all about the foreclosure lawsuit on my parents' estate. I know the bank is preparing to auction the note next week. Harrison, I absolutely cannot discuss your parents' private legal matters with you. It is a conflict of interest, he started, a nervous, professional edge entering his voice. Cut the crap, Abernathy, I snapped, my voice echoing in the large room. You knew they were robbing me blind 5 years ago, and you sat there silently and took their money. You owe me. I do not want you to represent them anymore. I want you to represent me. I want to buy the debt. All of it. Every single penny they owe. I want to purchase the bank note entirely through a blind LLC that cannot be traced back to my name. I will pay 20% over the current market value in cash to skip the public auction process entirely. By tomorrow afternoon, I want to be the sole legal owner of my parents' debt, and I want the deed transferred directly to my holding company. There was a long, incredibly stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. Harrison, if you actually do this, you are not just saving the house from the open market. You become the bank. You become their landlord. You have the absolute legal power to evict them immediately with zero notice. That is exactly the point, I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. Draw up the legal papers. I will wire the funds from my offshore account by 8 a.m. sharp. Do not fail me. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I had just initiated a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction purely out of spite and vengeance. Clara had warned me about this type of behavior. She always told me that drinking poison and expecting the other person to die was a fool's game. But this was not poison. This was absolute, undeniable power. For the first time in my entire life, I held the absolute authority to crush them into dust or save them. And I had zero intention of saving them. The storm was finally here, and I was holding the lightning. The next 3 days were a chaotic blur of aggressive legal maneuvering, endless signatures on digital contracts, and absolute, dead silence on my end regarding my family. My mother kept calling my office, leaving increasingly frantic, tearful voicemails about the impending bank foreclosure and how Rowan was having panic attacks. I did not answer a single one of her calls. I was too busy waiting patiently for the steel trap to snap completely shut. On Wednesday morning, my private investigator requested an urgent, in-person meeting at my office. He walked in, bypassing my assistant, looking incredibly grim. He dropped a thick, heavy, red-tabbed file directly onto my desk. You told me to dig deep into Rowan's financials to see exactly where the millions in inheritance money went, the investigator said, taking a seat uninvited and leaning forward. You thought he just made a series of bad tech investments and blew it on luxury cars. You were completely wrong. It is much, much worse than bad business. I opened the file. The first page was a highly detailed bank statement, highlighting massive, recurring wire transfers to offshore accounts and high-stakes casino conglomerates in Macau, Monaco, and Las Vegas. Rowan was not a failed businessman. He was a degenerate, out-of-control gambling addict. He blew through the entire liquid cash reserve in the first 2 years, the investigator explained, pointing at the numbers. Then he started taking out massive leverage and secondary mortgages against the estate to cover his gambling losses and keep up his wealthy appearances for his friends. But here is the real kicker, Harrison. Look at page 4. I flipped to the 4th page. It was a dense series of intercepted text messages and highly encrypted email logs. My blood turned to absolute ice in my veins as I read the name attached to the recipient accounts receiving kickbacks from the casinos. Margaret. Aunt Margaret. My mother's older sister. The woman who sat at the head of every Thanksgiving table wearing a giant diamond cross necklace, loudly quoting scripture, pretending to be a saint, and harshly judging everyone's life choices. The horrible woman who used to secretly pinch my arm under the table so hard it bruised, whispering that I was a lazy, ungrateful child who would never amount to anything in life. Your Aunt Margaret has a VIP host status at 3 different major casinos, the investigator said, his voice flat and professional. She is the exact person who introduced Rowan to the high-stakes tables. She convinced him it was a legitimate, fast way to double the family money quickly. She acted as his shadow broker, taking a 20% cut of every single loan he secured against your parents' house. She has been systematically, intentionally bleeding your brother dry, and by extension, destroying your parents' entire lives. I felt physically sick. The sheer, terrifying rot of my family tree was breathtaking. My mother, so deeply obsessed with public appearances and high society, was being dismantled from the inside out by her own sister, all while blindly propping up her golden child son, who was gambling away the legacy. They were all drowning in a toxic swamp of their own making, stepping on my head to try and get air. Does my mother know about this? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. No. The investigator shook his head firmly. Beatrice thinks Margaret is just lending Rowan spiritual support and business advice. She has absolutely no idea her own sister orchestrated the financial ruin. I closed the file slowly. The hot anger that had been burning inside me for 5 long years crystallized into something entirely different. It was not rage anymore. It was cold, calculated, surgical precision. I was not just going to take their house and kick them out. I was going to expose the rot to the bright light of day. The morning of the meeting arrived. The city outside was covered in a thick, oppressive gray fog, matching the mood perfectly. I stood alone in my penthouse office, dressed in a sharp, custom-tailored charcoal suit that cost more than my parents' first car. The massive desk was completely clear, except for one elegant, black leather folder resting perfectly in the center. I opened it slowly. Inside, on the left, were the heavily stamped, verified bank documents from lawyer Abernathy, confirming that my anonymous LLC had officially purchased the debt in full. The legal deed to the family estate was now legally under my absolute, undeniable control. On the right side of the folder were 3 crisp, brightly colored promotional brochures for Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility. I had even gone a step further and printed out the official state inspection reports, explicitly highlighting their long history of health code violations and terrible food ratings. I placed the admission forms directly on top of the pile. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Nathaniel. Today is the day. His voice came through the speaker, warm but highly cautious. Today is the day, I echoed, staring down at the black folder. Harrison. Nathaniel paused, choosing his next words very carefully. I support you. You know I do. I am completely in your corner. But I want you to ask yourself one thing before they walk through those elevator doors. Are you doing this to protect yourself? Or are you doing this purely to destroy them? Because if you let the hate consume you entirely, you become exactly what they are. Do not let them turn you into a monster. They already did, I said softly, and hung up the phone. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the street far below. A cheap, Blacktown car pulled up to the entrance of my building. I watched as my mother stepped out, looking frail but trying desperately to maintain her arrogant, upright posture. My father followed, shoulders slumped heavily, defeated by a world he never bothered to understand. And trailing behind them, looking incredibly nervous, sweating, and clearly hungover, was Rowan. They were walking directly into the lion's den, completely unaware that the son they had slaughtered 5 years ago was now the king of the jungle. I turned my back to the window and walked back to my desk. I sat down, placed my hands flat on the cool leather surface, took a deep breath, and waited for the door to open. The storm was here, and there would be absolutely no survivors. The heavy, soundproof glass doors of my penthouse office swung open with a slow, deliberate creak that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. My assistant, Sarah, walked in with a tight, impeccably professional expression, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished marble floor. She stepped aside, a silent sentinel, to let my family enter the sanctuary of my success. I remained seated behind my massive, custom-built mahogany desk, my hands folded neatly over the black leather folder that contained their entire financial obituary. I did not stand up to greet them. I did not offer a warm, welcoming smile. I did not provide the comfort of a handshake. I simply watched them walk into the room, observing them like a scientist studying a particularly predictable, arrogant, and doomed species of insect under a microscope. My mother, Beatrice, was the first to cross the threshold. Her head held high as if she still owned the room and everyone in it. She was wearing a tailored Chanel suit that looked a few seasons out of date, its edges slightly frayed, and she was clutching her vintage Birkin bag, a relic of her former status, like a physical, desperate shield against the brutal reality of her impending financial ruin. She plastered on a wide, overly bright, and deeply condescending smile that did not even attempt to reach her cold, calculating eyes. My father, Winston, shuffled in behind her, wearing a faded golf polo and wrinkled khakis, looking around the expansive, high-tech office with a confusing mixture of deep, underlying intimidation and hidden, simmering envy. And then came Rowan, the golden child, the brilliant entrepreneur who was supposed to multiply the family legacy for generations to come. He was wearing an expensive, once-sharp Italian suit, but his silk tie was slightly crooked. His eyes were bloodshot and glazed over, and he smelled faintly of stale bourbon, cheap mints, and the lingering sweat of desperation. He looked like a man who had not slept a full night in months, a man who had been running away from his own shadow. "Harrison, darling," my mother practically chirped, her voice hitting a high, melodic note that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. She walked toward my desk with her arms outstretched, her palms open, as if she genuinely expected me to leap up from my chair and embrace her in a tearful, cinematic reunion. "Oh my goodness! Look at this place. Look at you. We are just so incredibly proud. I was just telling the ladies at the country club that my son is the CEO everyone in the city is talking about. It is truly remarkable." I did not move a single muscle. I kept my posture rigid, my expression a carefully crafted mask of stone. I just stared intensely at her outstretched arms until she awkwardly dropped them to her sides, the fake, practiced smile faltering for a fraction of a second, revealing the genuine irritation bubbling just beneath the surface. "Have a seat," I said, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of any inflection, and flatter than a sheet of industrial concrete. They took the 3 modern, ergonomic leather chairs arranged directly across from my desk. Rowan slouched into his chair, trying to project an air of casual, bored confidence. But his leg immediately started bouncing with a frantic, uncontrollable nervous energy that betrayed his internal panic. My father kept his eyes firmly fixed on the expensive cityscape view outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, refusing to acknowledge my existence. "So," my mother began, crossing her legs and leaning forward, instantly attempting to take control of the narrative the way she always had during our family dinners. "I know it has been a while, Harrison, but family is family. Blood is thicker than water. And right now, your family needs you to step up. We are dealing with a ridiculous, entirely frivolous lawsuit from the bank regarding the real estate. They are being completely unreasonable about a temporary cash flow issue. We need you to fix it." "A temporary cash flow issue," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the heavy, pressurized air of the office. "Exactly," Rowan chimed in, puffing out his chest and using his best, most patronizing corporate boardroom voice, the one he used to try and intimidate employees who knew more than him. "The market took an unpredictable, massive downturn. My investments in the commercial sector were totally solid, but our partners backed out at the last possible minute. It is a classic liquidity trap. Anyone in high-level finance deals with this occasionally. I just need a bridge loan to cover the mortgage arrears and get the bank off our backs. A few million, tops. I will pay you back with significant interest the second my new tech venture gets the next round of funding." I looked at Rowan. He actually believed his own pathetic lies. He had been coddled, protected, and lied to by my mother for so long that he genuinely thought he could walk into my office, after 5 years of treating me like absolute garbage, and demand a multi-million-dollar loan based on a fake, bankrupt business pitch. He wanted me to hand over the hard-earned profits I had bled for to fund his delusions. "A few million," I said, keeping my face completely blank, my heart rate steady. "And what exactly is the collateral for this bridge loan, Rowan? Because from what I understand, you have leveraged the family estate to the absolute, physical maximum limit. You have secondary mortgages. You have outstanding liens. The bank is not just threatening a lawsuit. They are executing a full foreclosure. You have nothing left to offer." My mother waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a pesky, irrelevant fly. "That is just legal intimidation, Harrison. Lawyers always make things sound much worse than they actually are. We just need you to write a check to clear the immediate debt. Actually, your father and I were discussing it on the drive over, and we think it would be a brilliant idea for you to bring Rowan into your company. You need someone with his executive vision. You could give him a senior VP title, a generous salary, and a solid stock options package. It would solve all our problems and keep the family wealth safe." I sat back in my chair and simply stared at them. The sheer, unadulterated, breathtaking audacity was staggering. It was a masterclass in narcissistic delusion. They had stolen my inheritance, kicked me out of my childhood home, and watched me live in a freezing car for a winter. Now, they wanted me to pay off their massive, self-inflicted debts and hand Rowan a high-paying executive job in the company I built from nothing. They were walking blindly into the trap, setting themselves up for the biggest fall of their lives, completely blinded by their own extreme arrogance and self-importance. "You want me to give Rowan a job?" I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it seemed to vibrate in the room. "It makes perfect sense." My father finally spoke up, nodding eagerly, desperate to find an exit strategy from the financial ruin. "He is your older brother. He knows how to manage people. It would be good for your public image, showing that you value family business principles." I let the silence stretch for a long, agonizing minute. I looked at the black leather folder sitting perfectly in the center of my desk. I thought about the day of my grandfather's funeral, how my mother had explicitly told me to stand in the back row because Rowan was the new head of the family and needed to be seen greeting the important guests. I thought about the bitter divorce Clara went through, fighting tooth and nail for custody of her kids, while her ex-husband tried to drain her bank accounts, and how she taught me that you never, ever let anyone take what is rightfully yours. "Let me get this completely straight," I said, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the desk, locking eyes with my mother. "You want me to liquidate my personal assets, write a check to stop a foreclosure lawsuit on a property you explicitly stole from me, and then give the man who bankrupted our entire family a massive salary and executive power in my company." "When you say stole, Harrison, you are being incredibly dramatic," my mother scolded, using her classic condescending tone. "It was our money. We made a strategic choice. We funded your college fund, didn't we? You should be grateful for the foundation we gave you. Now it is your turn to give back to the family that made you who you are." "You did not fund my college," I corrected her, my voice turning to liquid ice. You drained my college fund to pay for Rowan's luxury penthouse apartment in business school. I took out student loans. I paid for every single credit hour myself while working the graveyard shift. Details, Harrison, details, she sighed, checking her expensive watch. Are you going to help your family or not? Because we have a meeting with our lawyer this afternoon to discuss bankruptcy protection. And I would rather not endure that public humiliation if you are going to do the right thing and write the check. They were so incredibly smug. They felt completely entitled to the money I had bled for. They thought this was a standard negotiation, a minor, annoying bump in the road of their wealthy, superior lives. They had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already vanished, and they were currently suspended in thin air, waiting for the gravity of reality to pull them straight down to hell. I am not going to write you a check, I said clearly and deliberately, my voice echoing in the quiet, sterile office. And you do not need to worry about the bank's foreclosure lawsuit anymore. That specific problem has already been completely, legally resolved. My mother's face instantly lit up with immense, blinding relief. A triumphant, greedy smile spread across her heavily manicured face. She looked at my father and squeezed his arm. Oh, Harrison, thank God. I knew you would not let your family lose our home. I knew you would take care of the debt behind the scenes. You are a good boy after all. Rowan let out a massive sigh of relief, slumping back in his chair and running a hand through his hair. Man, I owe you one. Seriously. I will get that VP office set up next week, and we can start talking about expanding your market share into the Asian sectors. I did not smile back. I kept my face entirely rigid, entirely devoid of any warmth or forgiveness. I slowly reached out and flipped open the black leather folder sitting on my desk. You completely misunderstand me, I said, my tone dropping to a lethal, quiet register. I did not pay off your debt to save you. I bought your debt to own you. I slid a thick stack of verified, stamped legal documents across the desk toward them. These are the official transfer papers processed by lawyer Abernathy yesterday afternoon. Through an anonymous LLC under my holding company, I purchased the entirety of your outstanding banknotes. I paid 20% over market value in cash to bypass the public auction. I own the primary mortgage. I own the secondary liens. The deed to the family estate is now legally in my name. I am not your savior. I am your landlord. And as your landlord, I am executing my legal right to evict you immediately. The silence in the room was absolute. It was deafening. My mother stared at the legal documents as if they were written in an alien language. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My father turned the color of old ash, his hands shaking violently as he picked up the top page and read the bold print transferring the deed. You bought the house? Rowan stammered, his arrogant facade completely shattering into a million pieces. You cannot do that. That is our home. That is my inheritance. It was your inheritance, I corrected him sharply. Then you took that inheritance and you gambled it away. Literally. Which brings me to my next point. I reached into the folder and pulled out the second stack of papers. The detailed bank statements, the encrypted email logs, and the casino wire transfers that my private investigator had compiled. I tossed them onto the center of the desk. They landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I know exactly where the money went, Rowan, I said, staring directly into his bloodshot eyes. I know you did not lose it in commercial real estate. I know you blew millions at the baccarat tables in Macau and the high roller suites in Vegas. You are a degenerate gambling addict. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls in genuine shock. She whipped her head around to look at Rowan. Gambling? Rowan, what is he talking about? You told us it was a bad tech investment. You told us the market crashed. Rowan shrunk in his chair, looking like a cornered, terrified rat. Mom, I can explain. It was just a string of bad luck. The house always wins, but I had a system. Shut up, Rowan, I snapped, cutting him off completely. I turned my icy gaze to my mother. But that is not even the best part, Beatrice. Do you want to know who facilitated the loans? Do you want to know who acted as Rowan's shadow broker and took a 20% cut of the money he stole from your house? My mother looked at me, her eyes wide with mounting horror, sensing the absolute devastation that was coming. Who? Your beloved sister, I said, delivering the fatal blow with surgical precision. Aunt Margaret. No, my mother whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, that is a lie. Margaret is a devout woman. She prays for our family every Sunday. She would never do such a thing. Read the logs, I commanded, pointing at the papers. Aunt Margaret has VIP host status at 3 major casino conglomerates. She introduced Rowan to the high-stakes tables. She took a massive kickback from the casinos for bringing him in, and she took a cut of every single loan she convinced him to take out against your property. While she was sitting at your Thanksgiving table telling you how holy she was systematically bleeding your golden child dry and destroying your entire financial life. My mother grabbed the papers, her hands trembling violently. She read the highlighted text messages. She saw the wire transfers matching Margaret's bank accounts. The reality of the absolute, profound betrayal hit her like a freight train. The sister she worshipped had used her favorite son to rob her blind. A raw, guttural sob ripped out of my mother's throat. It was not a fake, manipulative cry. It was the sound of a woman whose entire universe had just violently collapsed on top of her. Margaret, she wailed, covering her face with her hands. My own sister. How could she? My father sat completely frozen, staring blankly at the wall, the magnitude of their ruin finally breaking his spirit entirely. This brings us to the final piece of business, I said, reaching into the folder one last time. I pulled out the brightly colored brochures for Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility and the printed state inspection reports detailing the health code violations. I slid them gently across the desk until they rested right in front of my sobbing mother. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate my property, I told them, my voice devoid of any pity or mercy. Since you have absolutely zero savings, zero assets, and a mountain of external debt, I have taken the liberty of arranging your next living situation. Shady Pines is fully state-funded. The food is terrible, the staff is underpaid, and the rooms smell like bleach and despair. But it is a roof over your head. I have already filled out the admission forms. Sign them, pack whatever fits in 2 suitcases, and get out of my sight. Rowan jumped up from his chair, his face red with desperate, drunken anger. You psycho! You cannot do this. We are your family. You are a billionaire, you can just fix this. You cannot send our parents to a slum nursing home. I am not sending them anywhere, I said, standing up slowly from my chair, towering over my desk, looking down at my brother with absolute disgust. You sent them there, Rowan. Every time you placed a chip on the roulette table, every time you signed a secondary mortgage, you were packing their bags for Shady Pines. I am just providing the transportation. I will sue you, Rowan screamed, slamming his hands on my desk. I will get a lawyer. We will contest the debt purchase. We will take you down. I smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile that made Rowan instinctively step back. Go ahead. Call a lawyer. Tell them you want to contest a fully verified, cash-settled bank transaction while admitting to extreme gambling debts and mortgage fraud. My legal team will bury you so deep you will not see daylight for a decade. Now sit down and shut your mouth before I call security and have you thrown out of this building in handcuffs. The room fell dead silent again, save for the sound of my mother's ragged, broken sobbing. The arrogant, wealthy family that had walked into my office 20 minutes ago was completely gone. In their place were 3 broken, terrified, entirely powerless people who finally understood the exact price of their cruelty. The crushing weight of their total defeat hung heavily in the air of my office. But my mother, Beatrice, had spent her entire life manipulating the narrative and playing the victim to get her way. Even faced with absolute, undeniable ruin, her toxic instincts kicked in. She wiped her tears, her face twisting into a mask of pure, desperate malice. She grabbed her vintage Birkin bag, stood up, and pointed a shaking finger at me. You think you have one, Harrison? She hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You think you can just throw your own parents into a disgusting facility and walk away with your clean reputation? I will destroy you. I will go down to the lobby of this building right now. I will call the local news stations. I will call the newspapers. I will tell the entire world that the famous, wealthy tech CEO Harrison is a monster who committed elder abuse, stole his parents' house, and forced them onto the streets. The media will eat you alive. Your stock prices will plummet. Your investors will run for the hills. She turned and marched toward the heavy glass doors, signaling for Winston and Rowan to follow her. They scurried after her like frightened sheep following a mad shepherd. I did not stop her. I simply picked up my phone and pressed the button for my head of security. Marcus. Marcus, my family is heading down to the main lobby. They might try to create a scene with the press. Let them. But meet me at the private elevator. I am coming down. I grabbed the black leather folder containing all the legal documents and casino logs. I took a deep breath, adjusting my tie. I was not the terrified kid living in a freezing car anymore. I was ready for a public war. When the private elevator doors opened into the massive, marble-floored lobby of my headquarters, it was pure chaos. My mother had actually made good on her threat. She had managed to flag down a local news crew that was conveniently doing a business piece outside the building, and a small crowd of employees and onlookers had gathered. Beatrice was in the center of the lobby, crying hysterically for the cameras, playing the role of the devastated, abused mother perfectly. "He stole our home," she wailed to a reporter holding a microphone. "My son, Harrison, the billionaire, manipulated the banks and stole his elderly parents' home. He is forcing us into a dangerous, state-run nursing home to die while he lives in luxury. He has no heart. He is a monster." The reporter looked eager, ready to break a massive corporate scandal. Flashbulbs went off. The crowd muttered in shock. I walked out from behind the elevator bank, my footsteps echoing loudly on the marble floor. The crowd parted instantly, sensing the absolute authority radiating from my tailored suit and my cold, unyielding expression. The cameras immediately swiveled toward me. "Mom," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the entire lobby, loud enough for every single microphone to pick up. "Let us talk about family values and public scandals, shall we? Should we start with how you legally disinherited me 5 years ago and threw me out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on my back?" Her fake tears stopped instantly. Her face faltered. This was definitely not part of her carefully constructed script. The reporter quickly turned the microphone toward me. "Mr. Harrison, your mother claims you are forcefully evicting them and committing elder abuse. Do you have a response?" "I certainly do," I said calmly, opening the black leather folder right in front of the cameras. 5 years ago, this woman and my father willingly signed over their entire multimillion-dollar estate exclusively to my older brother, Rowan. They explicitly cut me out of the will. I built this entire company from nothing, living in my car. I pulled out the legal transfer documents and held them up. This week, the bank filed a massive foreclosure lawsuit against them because my brother, Rowan, leveraged their estate to the maximum limit and defaulted on every single loan. I then pulled out the thick stack of casino logs and wire transfers. He did not lose the money in business. He lost it in high-stakes casinos in Macau and Las Vegas. Over $4 million blown on baccarat and roulette. And the worst part? My mother's own sister, Margaret, acted as his VIP casino broker and took a 20% kickback on every dollar he stole from his parents' house. The reporter's eyes went wide. The camera zoomed in heavily on the highlighted casino documents. The crowd in the lobby went completely dead silent, hanging on to every single word. "I did not steal their house," I continued, my voice ringing with undeniable truth. "I used my own hard-earned salary and company profits to aggressively purchase the toxic debt from the bank in cash to prevent a public auction. I own the deed fair and square. The retirement home brochure she is waving around is the only facility that accepts residents with zero assets and a history of extreme financial fraud. It is not punishment. It is literally all they can afford, and it is far more shelter than she gave me when she left me to freeze in a parking lot. I looked directly at the camera, my face a mask of stone. This is not a story about elder abuse. This is a story about a deeply toxic family facing the severe legal and financial consequences of their own horrific actions. The truth is all right here in these legal documents. The reporter immediately lowered the microphone, the narrative completely destroyed. The news crew realized they did not have a story about a villainous CEO. They had a pathetic story about a wealthy family that gambled away their fortune and tried to blame the son they abandoned. They started packing up their equipment immediately. My mother stood in the center of the massive lobby, entirely exposed. Her performance had spectacularly backfired, leaving her with absolutely nothing but the ugly, undeniable truth she had tried so hard to hide. The crowd stared at her not with pity, but with profound disgust. Winston grabbed her arm, looking utterly humiliated, pulling her toward the exit. Rowan kept his head down, hiding his face from the remaining cameras. 48 hours, Mom, I said quietly as she walked past me, utterly defeated. The moving van will be at the estate at 9 in the morning on Friday. Try another public stunt like this again, and I will publish Aunt Margaret's casino kickback logs on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. She flinched violently but did not say a single word. As the glass doors closed behind them, Marcus stepped up beside me. Are you okay, boss? Marcus asked quietly. I watched their cheap town car pull away into the city traffic. I had won. I had destroyed their dignity, seized their assets, and exposed their lies to the world. But standing in the lobby, holding the heavy folder, I felt an unexpected, crushing wave of exhaustion wash over me. I am fine, Marcus. I lied smoothly. Let's get back to work. Friday morning arrived with the heavy, unavoidable weight of a funeral. I stood outside the massive iron gates of my childhood estate, watching the cheap, state-funded Shady Pines moving van idle loudly in the circular driveway. Nathaniel was parked slightly down the street in his sleek Porsche, having insisted on being here just in case things turned violent or unpredictable. I stood in the cold morning air, my hands deep in my pockets, waiting for the final act of this tragedy to conclude. The heavy oak front door of the mansion finally opened. My mother emerged, looking incredibly small and frail without her expensive jewelry and designer clothes. She was carrying a single, battered suitcase. My father followed, carrying 2 cardboard boxes filled with whatever meager personal items they were allowed to keep. They walked slowly toward the grim-looking moving van, looking like prisoners walking toward the gallows. Then Rowan walked out. He was not wearing an expensive suit. He was wearing faded jeans and a plain gray sweater. He looked pale, exhausted, but for the first time in his entire life, he looked completely sober. He walked directly toward me, bypassing the moving van entirely. He stopped a few feet away, clutching 2 items in his hands. Harrison, Rowan said, his voice quiet, stripped of all the arrogant bravado. I crossed my arms, maintaining my cold distance. Are you here to beg for money, Rowan? Because the bank is closed. No, he said, shaking his head slowly. He held out his left hand. Resting in his palm was a cashier's check. I went to a pawn shop downtown yesterday. I sold my Rolex, my designer shoes, my golf clubs. Everything I had left of value in my apartment. It is not much. It is only about $8,000. But I want you to use it to pay for a cheap apartment for Mom and Dad. Keep them out of Shady Pines for a few months. Please. I stared at the check, genuinely surprised. The golden child was actually sacrificing his own prized possessions. But it was what he held in his right hand that completely stopped my heart. It was an old, yellowed envelope, sealed with wax. I was cleaning out the attic last night, Rowan continued, his voice trembling slightly. I found a hidden loose floorboard behind Dad's old desk. This was inside. It is from Grandpa. It is dated a week before he died. He handed me the envelope. My hands shook slightly as I broke the old wax seal and pulled out the delicate, handwritten letter. It was my grandfather's distinctive, sweeping handwriting. My dearest family, the letter read, I leave behind a massive company and a lot of money, but none of it matters. The estate is not just concrete and bank accounts. It is the love your grandmother and I built together. Money will come and go, but the blood in your veins is permanent. Share the wealth. Protect the legacy. But above all else, take care of each other. If this money ever divides you, then my life's work was a complete failure. I read the words 3 times. A heavy, suffocating knot formed in my throat. My grandfather had built this empire to keep us together, and my parents had weaponized it to tear us apart. We completely failed him, Rowan whispered, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. I failed him. I failed you, Harrison. I destroyed everything because I was too weak and too stupid to earn it myself. I am so sorry. I know you will never forgive me, and you shouldn't. But please, don't let Mom and Dad die in that terrible place. I looked up from the letter. I looked at the massive stone house that held so many memories, both wonderful and horrific. I looked at my parents, standing by the running van, watching us with terrified, desperate eyes. The angry, deeply wounded teenager inside me wanted to celebrate their ultimate defeat, to force them onto that van and walk away laughing. But the man I had become, the man who built an empire through hard work and loyalty, knew that true justice was not about causing maximum pain. True justice was about breaking the cycle of toxicity forever. I pulled out my phone and dialed the driver of the moving van. Cancel the order. They are not going to Shady Pines. My parents collapsed against each other, sobbing in pure relief. Rowan dropped his head into his hands, weeping openly. I walked over to them, my face stern, establishing absolute, unbreakable boundaries. Listen to me very carefully, because I will only say this once. You are not keeping this massive house. I am selling the property. But you are not going to the state facility either. With the money Rowan just provided, and a strict, heavily monitored allowance from my trust, I am renting you a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. You will learn to live on a strict budget. I turned my fierce gaze to Rowan. And you are checking into a strict, inpatient rehab facility this afternoon. My legal team will manage your enrollment. When you get out, you will get a minimum wage job, and you will pay me back every single penny of the allowance I give our parents. Furthermore, all 3 of you are required to attend mandatory family therapy with Dr. Harper, a specialist I have hired. If any of you skip a single session, or if Rowan touches a deck of cards or a drink, the funding stops immediately, and you will be on the street. Do you understand my terms? They all nodded frantically, their eyes filled with a desperate, fragile hope replacing their previous terror. This is not absolute forgiveness, I told them coldly, stepping back to create physical distance. This is a highly conditional opportunity to prove that you can actually be decent human beings. Do not make me deeply regret this. As they began moving their meager boxes toward Rowan's car instead of the van, I walked away from the estate and got into the passenger seat of Nathaniel's waiting Porsche. Nathaniel looked at me, his eyes soft with genuine respect. You chose the hardest path, Harrison. You chose healing over revenge. I chose freedom, I said, leaning my head back against the luxurious leather seat, feeling a massive, invisible weight lift off my chest. I am finally free of their ghosts. 6 months later, the massive family estate was officially repurposed. I did not sell it to Victor. I did not turn it into a parking lot. With Clara and Sylvia's brilliant legal maneuvering, we transformed the mansion into the headquarters for the Foundation for Familial Healing, a massive nonprofit charity dedicated to providing free legal aid, therapy, and emergency housing for young adults who have been financially abused or disinherited by toxic family dynamics. At the grand opening gala, I stood on the massive front porch, delivering a speech to a crowd of supporters. In the back row, standing quietly and respectfully, were my parents and Rowan. Rowan was 6 months sober, working as a manager at a local hardware store, looking healthier than he had in a decade. My mother was wearing a simple, inexpensive dress, holding my father's hand tightly. We were not completely fixed. We were not a perfectly happy, normal family. The deep scars were still there, and trust would take years, maybe decades, to rebuild. But we were finally trying. We were finally honest. I stepped down from the podium and walked over to Nathaniel, who handed me a glass of sparkling water. I looked out at the foundation that bore my grandfather's name, realizing that the ultimate revenge against toxic people is not destroying their lives. The ultimate revenge is proving that you can take the immense pain they caused you and use it to build a life so beautiful, so incredibly meaningful, that their darkness can never touch you again. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw an absolute hard line to protect your own peace and future? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.